Welcome back to the Engineered Angler. I'm just trying to keep up with tradition. Today we're going to make a lure out of balsa. We haven't used balsa in a long time, and we're going to make a lure a lot of people have been asking me to make for a while. Let me show you. And I think if I actually finish this drawing, I think you'll recognize what it is. I think that little blade should give it away. I'm going to make my version of a Whopper Plopper. Now, I have made another video on me actually modifying a Whopper Plopper that I bought myself and adding a few touches that actually improved the function of that lure. In this build, we're going to incorporate those ideas and we're going to make a better plopper. Now, typically when someone builds these, they'll put a wire going all the way through. We're going to make ours just a little bit different because while having the tail hook eye right there at the very center is okay, having the tie-on eye up here where this would go through is not okay. We need it a little bit below that line. Our tie-on eye is going to be right about there proportionally, so this wire won't be able to do this. And I don't want to have a screw-in eye because we're making this out of balsa. So I want a full wire harness that also acts as an axle back here for this tail to spin on. So we're going to use a technique that I like to call drop from the top, and that's basically we're going to insert this wire harness from the top. We'll have our belly hook eye near to the bottom of this sag in the belly. And this sag in the belly is actually kind of a critical component to the design because this area here gives us that extra flotation we need to counteract what this tail actually does. Because when this tail is down in the water, the way it's shown here, the force of the water creates a turning moment that forces the nose down. Now, if you've ever used one of these, you know if you've got a lot of line out, and maybe if you're fishing from a kayak down low, the moment you start to reel, that lure drops under the water. And if you continue to reel, it'll continue under the water. It just slowly comes back up. So what I did to counteract that on the one that I bought is I created a really flat face there to create sort of a skiing surface. I lowered the tie-on eye to help the line pull the nose up a little bit. And on this one, we're going to make it just a little bit fatter at the belly to add that extra flotation right here. The other thing that you have to remember if you're going to make one of these is that this little fin has to sink. It can't be floating. So as it rotates, it drops down into the water and gets spun around by the movement like a single-bladed propeller. So we're going to keep it simple as far as any kind of carving or fancy shaping. The idea, as usual with me, is to focus on function to make sure this lure is going to actually work. So this rough sketch is looking straight in to the lure from the face. The small area is the flat spot on the front, but what I'm actually trying to show you here is that I want to get a little bit of a hollowing out as it goes down. So I don't want it round, I want it to be sort of narrow at the bottom. That shape will help that body to track straight and not want to spin with the influence from this propeller. So the top view shows that it's going to be very aerodynamic, not anything special, but what I want to show is that the widest point here is going to coincide with the deepest point in the lure. So let me give you some dimensions. All right, hopefully this will be enough information for those who want to follow along and make their own. Let's get started with ours. All right, that should be enough for us to get started cutting this thing out. To draw in the contour from front to back on the top of this thing, I need a center line first. So I'm just going to use our cutoff piece as a straight edge. All right, now I just need to get that contour. Now I know that I want the widest point right here at the very bottom of the belly. So I made a little tick mark right there and we'll carry that across. And then I put a couple little tick marks to control the width at the front and the back. And then I measured and set the width, and now I can just lay in the line with these curves. And I don't mind making it just a little bigger than it actually will be, because we'll be doing a lot of sanding and shaping with this thing. And balsa is really easy to over sand. I'll do the other side, and then we'll get to cutting this out. did cut a little wide of the lines, and I'm doing that so I can give myself a little bit of extra meat to sand down here. But it's really important to start off with good symmetry. This way you don't run into trouble trying to find symmetry by removing material and maybe even removing too much. Alright, we got working lines everywhere. Let's start shaping. So it's real easy to shape this stuff with a razor blade, but it's also real easy to overdo it. So take your time. And since I'm going to make the bottom a little narrower than the top, I can be a little less cautious taking material off the side here at the bottom. It's amazing to me how different one little spot on the balsa will be from the next. One will be like cutting styrofoam, the other one will be a little denser and surprisingly harder. But of course, it's much easier than any other wood. Now you see it's starting to come along and starting to get that rough shape that's slowly becoming the right contour. Alright, I'm going to carve a little bit more and then I'm going to move on to sandpaper, and I'll get back to you when I'm a little closer to the right shape. I could probably do this for another hour, maybe 2 hours, just kind of sighting down, picking off all the little tiny ridges and little humps I'm leaving behind. I'm going to give it a little more sanding, and I think I'll put a clear coat on it just to protect it a little bit, because just about anything can put a mark on this thing, including your fingernails. So that'll be the next step, a clear coat. I wiped down the lure, got all the dust off of it. And a thin clear coat like this will act like a sealer, but also like a sanding sealer. So it'll kind of raise the nap a little bit. It'll raise the grain, and we'll probably have to give it a little light sanding later. And the end grain will definitely absorb a bunch. Balsa's kind of weird. It tends to be soft and really light, but there's a certain rigidity to it. There's a kind of stiffness to it that plastics, unless it's a thick plastic, plastics just don't really have. I had a surfing buddy of mine from Ecuador who was involved in making some of the first balsa surfboards, and he loaned me one for a long time, and I have to say it felt very different. It didn't flex like a regular fiberglass board, but it definitely looked cool with the wood grain in the middle of it. Alright, I think that's going to do it. I'm going to put it in the chamber to set up. Don't have to worry about bubbles, so I can turn the lights on right away. And I can let that go for like 45 minutes and get some lunch. It's good and set, and just looking at it, it's really rough. You can hear that. So I'm going to go ahead and sand that roughness down and give it another thin clear coat so it has a nice glossy finish, and then we'll get to the rest of it. I've marked the lure where I want to cut it, but it's getting a little bit late and I don't want to do that now. I want to get out there and do a little fishing before it gets too dark. Alright, it's the next day, and I've gone ahead and put in a line where I'm going to cut this thing in half. But I've also put in the line where I want to lay in that propeller blade. And to make a template, I'm going to go ahead and use this cutoff piece because it's so thin right here. I'll be able to just sort of form it around this. And I think I'll probably make a groove in here to be able to set it in. Now, in the end, I'm going to make it out of aluminum, but I need a template first. That should be wide enough to be able to make this. I'm going to use this 150 grit sandpaper because it's actually on a latex backing. It's pretty nice. It stretches over just about anything. So I'm going to stretch it over here. And the nice thing is I'll be able to see the line that I drew, and then I can just sort of work my way to the shape. Alright, that's getting pretty close. Go a little deeper. See it on the angle? That looks pretty good. Alright, so that's got us a template. Now I just need to design the rest of the shape. That looks about right. See if it's the right size for the lure size. I think that's about right. I think we can use that as our template. Let's see if we can get this thing shaped. Alright, I've got this old handle to something. I don't remember what it used to go to, but it's got a nice round ball on it. We're going to use that to cup this thing. I'm going to cup it that direction. And I've got a plastic hammer too, so let's see how this works. it's working. It's just going to take a little time. All right, check that out. Nice, it's got a nice cup to it now. That should make that nice burble sound that the Whopper Ploppers make. Let's see if the Dremel tool will work. All right, that looks perfect. It looks like it's gonna contour perfectly. I just need to cut a slot for it. Alright, we've got our line for our slot to be able to drop in our harness from the top. Got it down to where we have first the connection with the tail and then the tie-on eye. And I've got my spot to drill the hole for the belly hook eye. Alright, now that I've got all this end grain exposed and it's not sealed anymore, I'm going to go ahead and seal it with some crazy glue. Because crazy glue really gets down into the pores, into the grain, and it not only hardens and seals, actually makes that wood just a lot stronger, especially with balsa. And after I know it's absorbed quite a bit, I'll go ahead and just dab off the excess. And then once it's really good and dry, I'll go ahead and sand it back just a little bit. Alright, now let's go ahead and make our wire harness, and we're going to use this 174-pound stainless steel leader wire. And I'm going to cut like a 10-inch piece because I don't want to end up short. And first I'll make a twist eye for the tie-on eye. This eye will anchor it while we measure for all the other bends. And I'm going to give this tie-on eye just a little bit of a tweak downward so it sits down where I want it. It doesn't drift upwards. And I'm going to mark where I need to bend for the belly eye. That's it right there. Let's see how that fits. Okay, that's perfect. Now I just need to loop it and bring it back up. And I'll put a kink where I need it to loop. And now that I've got that leg done, I can go ahead and straighten out the back, and that'll run through the tail for the propeller shaft kind of thing. Let's see how that works. And there you go. All we gotta do is fill in this slot with some resin, and we're gonna be ready to assemble so we can paint. All right, I'm gonna put a counterweight just forward of the belly hook eye. And the idea is that the counterweight will offset the weight of the hook plus 1 gram. So I've got a little lead slug here, and it needs to weigh around 240. It weighs 2.26. I'm going to go with that. I don't want to have to drill 2 holes, and hopefully the lure won't sit too tail down. Alright, it fit in there. There you go. I just need to fill it in and sand that back. And then I still have some questions about assembly here. On complicated lures like this, I'm always asking myself, do I assemble it all first, or do I wait till after it's painted and assemble it? Should I partially assemble it and then paint it and then finish assembling it? It's always a question. I think this time I'm going to assemble the main body parts, and the last thing I'm going to do after painting and before clear coating is put the propeller blade on it. So I'm using this lubricant can little spray nozzle, and I'm going to install it in the tail, and that'll create a sleeve for this thing to ride on. That'll protect the wood since it's so soft, and also I think it'll make it easier for it to spin. And to glue it in there, I'm just gonna coat it all on the outside with crazy glue and then slide it in there, spinning it so I can get the crazy glue around. And then I want a little bit sticking out of the back, maybe about 1 millimeter, and I'll cut the little tube off flush on the inside here. And that should slide on pretty easy. Spin nice and freely. All right, I think that's gonna work just fine. On soft wood like this, I'll run the drill bit backwards for a little bit so I don't chip out the wood. And I'm partially filling the big slot with baking soda and super glue, and then I'll finish it off with UV resin. It never fails. I always get a bunch of glue on me. And I'll bring that up to the top with UV resin. And I'll top off the lead weight with UV resin too. And then it's just a matter of sanding this stuff back nice and smooth again. Alright, I'm going to have a little glass bead right there just to make sure nothing binds if I get this thing just a little bit too tight. So I'll mark it where I want to bend it. I'm going to bend down. I should be able to get it to wrap. And then I'll give it at least 2 wraps, maybe 3, depending on what I need to actually cinch it up a little bit. I think that's got it right there. Alright, that looks pretty good. And I guess we're ready to paint. Alright, it's finally painting time on this thing. Let's go ahead and wipe it down with some alcohol. Let's start off with a white base coat. This is Tester's Aztec paints. Alright, I almost forgot to tape up the little bead. I had to go back and tape that up before I finished. I'm a little disappointed. I've got a couple of little spots there where crazy glue ran and I didn't see it. And I don't think I'm going to start sanding that now. So hopefully we can live with the little imperfections. Otherwise, it's looking pretty good. Let's move on to the next color. What I plan to do, a light silver scale pattern, kind of starting out light, getting a little darker near the top. And I'm going to have undertones, like background colors that start with white down here, and then I'm going to go yellow and then green and then black. You really can't go too much with patterns with this thing because the tail's spinning, so kind of hard to really have a matching pattern all the way back, and there's really not much of a point in it. Now I'm going to go partial way up from the belly with this Comart Hansa yellow. It's a little bit kind of orangier than your regular bright yellow, and I got to make sure I'm painting the bottom of the spinner too. And I think I'm going to do the bottom yellow too. And that was transparent bright green from Createx. Now I'm going to move on to transparent black, also Createx. I'm going to do the top, and it's a real pain keeping that spinner from moving around on me. Alright, now if I can just keep these guys oriented, put a scale pattern on. There's always benefits and setbacks depending on how you assemble your lure, especially on a complicated build like this. Then for the scales, I'm going to use this golden paints, iridescent silver. And I'm painting from the top and letting it sort of fade a little bit to the sides. And then I'm going to put some sort of random patches of a really dark green right on top of the scales, so it kind of takes over on the scale pattern too. Alright, I really like that. Now I'm going to blend in this dark green on top. Alright, I'm pretty happy with that. It's got a nice color shift to it. Before I put the eyes on, I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of red right on that little flat spot. I think I'm going to go with these red rimmed eyes. I think they look pretty cool. Oh yeah, I think that was the right color. Cool. Well, I'm going to go ahead and let this dry for about an hour. And as usual, I'm going to seal it with the Mint Coat polyacrylic, cut 15% as always. And I do cut this stuff with distilled water. I'll spray it, probably give it 2, maybe 3 coats. I want to protect it really well because I still have to handle it to put that little propeller blade on. Hopefully that goes okay. So I'll get back to you when I'm gluing that thing in, and then we'll clear coat it. And it's gonna be a little too late today to go fishing, but tomorrow, we'll take it to the lake tomorrow. It's time to put the little blade on this thing, and I'm gonna do it with some 2-part epoxy. I'm using the Gorilla Glue version, and I'm gonna do the piping bag trick. I'll take this little Ziploc, and I'll squeeze some epoxy in there. Don't need much. And once it's in there, a matter of sealing it. And then I'm gonna move it all the way to the bottom, and then you can just sort of mix it up once it's down there. And work it in. Can't take too long here. And then I'll put it all in the one corner, and I'll just snip the very tip of the corner off to create like a little nozzle. Then I'll just squirt it in here. And it's just a matter of jamming this guy in there. And then I'll just take a paper towel and clean off the excess. All right, that should do it. And why it didn't occur to me to put the blade on the very bottom so that when it was just sort of sitting there, it would be nicely aligned. But instead I made it the way I drew it on the board. That's what happens with engineers and plan sets. We just work by the plan. All right, gonna let it set for probably 20 minutes and we'll clear coat it. All right, here's a little bit of a problem. I haven't clear coated it yet because I was thinking about this. If that tail is gonna spin while this thing rotates, is the rotator actually doing anything? I think it's still gonna get a sag in it. So we're gonna have to find a way to keep that thing from rotating. There you go. That's gonna have to do it. All right, I'm gonna put a nice thick coat on here. Shouldn't take too long. We got plenty of time today to get on the lake and get some good shots in the water. Hopefully the water's clear enough I can take some shots from underneath. Gotta be real careful now. The inside of the joint is protected already. I just need to get it around the edge just to make it look uniform. And that little spinner is gonna be the biggest pain in my behind. So I'm gonna go ahead and let it turn for a little while just to make sure everything's evened out, because it really was a hassle to get that little tail section to hold still. We'll be able to get out there on the water in about, I don't know, let's see, about an hour, maybe a little more than an hour. There it is. I can't believe that I missed the obvious and didn't put the little propeller on the bottom. Now when it hangs down, the paint scheme is out of sync. Oh well, I don't think the fish will notice. I haven't even tank tested it. I don't know what it's gonna look like. Let's put it in the water and see. All right. Oh, this is gonna be neat. All right, as usual, I'm gonna have a slideshow with this thing at the very end. So stick around to the end if you want to have some better shots of the finish. Oh, yeah. Oh, my drag is loose. Oh, he got off. No way my drag was loose. Look at it. Oh, you son of a gun. Oh, I can't believe that. I couldn't set the flipping hook. Ah, why did I loosen my drag? I guess I should have checked. Oh well, at least I know this thing will attract a bite. So I guess it's not just all hype with this Whopper Plopper stuff. They actually do attract a bite. Maybe the next thing I need to do is perfect this design and make a mold. What do you guys think? Anybody out there ever made a mold of a Whopper Plopper? Let me know. I'll see you guys on the next video.